I should I should probably do the versus Capcom roster building retrospective, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each roster in order of VOD popularity. Um like basically the I'll start with the one that got the least views on YouTube, and I'll end with the one that got the most views on YouTube. If I just tell you what my best videos were on YouTube over all my streams, then that kind of spoils the retrospective. So we'll do the retrospective now. Um, and this I don't have a lot of pre-prepared assets for the top, for the worst to best. So I'll pull up a Word document for that part. But we'll be hopping into the rosters themselves. Be hopping into the rosters themselves for the retrospective. So, let's see. Okay, cool. Okay. Nice. So the so my versus Capcom streams from ninth place to first place. My worst um should also hold on. I'm gonna pull up my info in another window here. So my least popular versus Capcom stream is Miyoho versus Capcom with 85 views on the YouTube VOD. So this is Miyoho versus Capcom. Yeah, this was a roster where it was Capcom versus the company that makes these big crazy free to play gotcha game experiences. These are the Genshin Impact guys, the Honkai Star Rail guys, the Zenless Zone Zero guys. Um and yeah, I thought it'd be interesting to make a roster uh where characters from those three games and some of Mihoyo's other projects face against Capcom's big IP. And yeah, what guess I can pull up the guidelines for that. Yeah, basically, yeah, like it was a lot of the Capcom characters I picked were characters with like anime vibes, characters with weapons. Um, it was going to be a 2v2. The key mechanic was the perfect switch where Can spend resources to give a partner a character specific boost when swapping. Obviously, that like didn't really inform too much of my character decisions, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I think this ended up being a fun roster. I'm not shocked that this got the least views, and I think it's okay that this got the least views. This was a fun roster to put together, but I think the reality is that the Venn diagram of people that like Hoyoverse games and people that are really into Capcom games, like, to the extent that they care about versus Capcom, I think those circles have the least overlap of any of my other versus Capcom rosters. Um, did I do this before Zenless Zone Zero came out? Um, I did this when Zenless Zone Zero had been out for 2 weeks. And none of the post-release content had come out yet. Um, so actually, yeah, should I highlight certain characters here? Um, like I don't really have a way to make these icons really big really fast. I can make them bigger, but it takes a minute. Um, so I guess yeah, I guess basically this roster was Ryu, Chun-Li, Crimson Viper, and Ryu, Chun-Li, Crimson Viper, Kimberly, and Seth, all from like various Street Fighter games. Um, Raiden Shogun, Tartaglia, uh, Cade. Oh God, I forget this dude's name. What is it? Hold on. Um, Katahara Kazuha or something. Um, Katahara Kazuha, yeah. Um, Zhongli. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I can actually kind of do this, I think. Like Ryu. Oh no. Well, no. It might be too much work to make them all bigger. And also it's that'll make this whole retrospective pretty long. So, yeah, Zhongli and yeah, sorry, Raiden Shogun, Tartaglia, Kazuha, Zhongli and Arataka Ito all from Genshin. And then we got Morgan and Sinko from Darkstalkers, Mega Man.exe, and Tron Bon from Mega Man stuff, and Wesker from Resident Evil versus March 9th, Don Hong, Imbibitor Lune, Brania, Silver Wolf, and Firefly all from Honkai Star Rail. And I did Mega Man EXE specifically because Honkai Star Rail has this thing called the Simulated Universe where you go into the internet and do dungeons, which is what you do in Mega Man EXE. So I thought that was cool. Then we got Dante Amaterasu, Fulu, Dante from Devil May Cry, Amaterasu from Okami, Fulu from Breath of Fire, Vanessa Z. Schneider from PNO3 and Strider Hiryu, just as like various kind of like, cool anime fantasy characters with weapons. And then yeah, Zenless Zone Zero. I picked Nicole Damara, Ambi Danara, Von Lycaon, um, and then thank God, who is this again? This is right, Kiana Castellana, and her share of the Void from Honkai Impact Third. Um, and yeah, like I kind of weaved a story around this. A lot of fun, like anime characters interacting. Did 2 seasons of DLC like I always do. Um, and and yeah, like I think I came up with a fun roster, but yeah, I see why like it's not the most popular one. Um, yeah. So for each of these rosters, I'm gonna do like if I had room for one more character on each side, who would I add? And like, would I remove anyone? Would I remove any characters to like make room for those characters? So for Mihoyo, I think like I picked Von Lycaon because I thought he had a cool design, but honestly, it feels like he's not very important in the grand scheme of Zenless Zone Zero. Um, so if I were to add one character on the Mihoyo side, I probably would remove Von Lycaon to make room for a character that released after I did this roster. Um, and that is Jane Doe from Zenless Zone Zero. And yeah, I made little icons for a lot of these characters. Um, so this is almost like a little tiny piece of DLC. Um, Jane Doe is like Jane Doe is the character that made everyone realize like definitively that Zenless Zone Zero was like a Gooner game. like like her marketing was like so horny. But honestly, like her character design is great. Her moveset's really cool. Um and she's just got a great personality and a fun vibe. And uh they would absolutely fucking put her in the game. If this game existed, Mihoyo would put her in this game in a heartbeat. Like instantly, 100%. And it's funny, I don't really I've stopped playing Zenless Zone Zero. I haven't played in a while. I didn't really mind Jane Doe being kind of a Gooner edition, but then they kind of went the horny marketing route for like the characters that look like children, and that was enough for me. I haven't played Zenless in months. But every now and then I'll I'll hear about his Endless update, and it doesn't seem like any characters that are like as big and iconic as Jane Doe have released for Zenless since then. So Jane Doe is pretty easily the character I would make room for. On the Capcom side, um, one thing I realized is that um, a lot of my a lot of my Capcom characters are more like sci-fi or characters with like high tech stuff, like either modern day stuff or like sci-fi or high tech stuff. Um and and they kind of outnumber the fantasy characters I have. Mihoyo's got like a mix of like it's got almost an even mix of like modern day um sci-fi and fantasy, right? Because Genshin is the fantasy, Zenless is the modern day, and Honkai Star Rail is the high tech. Um is like the sci-fi. Um but Capcom's got a lot of sci-fi in modern day, but it doesn't really have a lot of fantasy. I think the characters you can argue are fantasy are like Folu, Amaterasu, not even Strider's sci-fi, Strider's high tech. Um and then Monster Hunter, maybe. Like Virgil and Dante have fantasy vibes, but they're also like modern day. They're more modern day than they are fantasy, probably. Um, so I would even that out with a character that I think has strong fantasy vibes, which is San, um, the granddaughter of the original San, kind of returning from Marvel vs. Capcom 2. She's got that magical staff. She's got a bunch of like wacky little abilities, and as like a beast person, like a little monkey girl, I think she'd fit in with kind of the beast like characters from Zenless specifically. Like she could have dialogue with like Ben Better. Um, is ZZZ even a Gooner game? You've seen games that go way harder on the Gooner bait, lol. Um, It is a Gooner game, yes. Like it is that game is pretty horny, and I think it's more like more aggressively horny than either of its other games. Like uh Genshin and Honkai Star Rail they're both filled with like hot characters. Um but I think neither of those games kind of actively objectify their cast the way that Zenless does. Um I think especially compared to Mihoyo's other content, Zenless is the Gooner game out of the three. I don't disagree that there's games that go harder on that. Um but Zenless still is. Zenless still is the Gooner game. But yeah, San would be who I'd add on the Capcom side. I don't know if I'd I don't know if there's anyone I'd remove from the Capcom side to make room. Um because I think the base roster is really good. Um and the DLC also is kind of uh filled with essential additions. So like Sansan would basically be like if I just had an extra slot free, Sansan would go in that slot because I don't want to remove anyone to make room for her. But yeah, yeah, Mihoyo versus Capcom. I think I'm glad I did Mihoyo versus Capcom. Like I came up with some fun character interactions, and it was fun to do research for this. Devin helped me do research for the Genshin side of things. And then I was kind of left to my own devices for the Honkai Star Rail stuff, which I had played a good amount of, and the Zenless Zone Zero stuff, which which had just come out. Um, I also did as much Honkai Third Impact research as I could, and I stuck a character from Tears of Themis, Vin Richter. I snuck him in there, and I thought that was fun. But yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not too hurt about ninth place for this. It makes sense to me. It'd be cool if more people notice this roster, but you know, if I had to rally for one roster for more people to notice, I don't think it'd be this one. Okay. Mihoyo vs. Capcom is also the only roster that had less than 100 views over the last year. Um, Eighth place is Dreamworks versus Capcom with 159 views. So in fact, Mihoyo vs. Capcom is the only one with less than 150 views. Like DreamWorks vs. Capcom has almost double the views of Mihoyo vs. Capcom. But I digress. Where are you, DreamWorks? DreamWorks versus Capcom. This one I am a little sad that more people didn't notice. This is kind of this is kind of one of my sillier rosters, I think, but I love how silly it is. More Shrek fans showed up than the Gooners, lol. Like the Shrek fans aren't Gooners themselves. Come on, man. You think you think people looking at that a hunk of green all day aren't Gooners? You can't spell Gooner without ogre. You rearrange the letters in Gooner and you get ogre. uh Goner. you, you can't you can't spell Gooner without on ogre. You rearrange Gooner and you get on ogre. People are getting on ogre. That's why they're Gooners. Or no ogre. Yeah, good point. So I guess maybe Shrek fans are the opposite of Gooners because Gooner is no ogre. I think I'm correct. I think on ogre is correct. True, the Venn diagram between Gooners and Shrek fans is a circle. Yeah, man, on ogre. Anyway, DreamWorks versus Capcom. This is a really fun roster to come up with because I basically I came up with a lot of like rivalries and relationships, right? Um this is for example, this is the only roster um that has Lord Raptor in it on the Capcom side from Darkstalkers, and I put him in because I thought he could have um I thought he could have a rivalry and an interaction with Poppy from Trolls as two characters that like love music and performing, you know? Like they'd become friends over the course of the story, right? Um I had Captain Commando in here um commanding his entire team from his arcade game, like the baby in the robot suit and you know those other characters, um because I wanted him to interact with the penguins of Madagascar and have the leader of the penguins of Madagascar have an inferiority complex about what a better leader Captain Commando is. But he'd realized by the end of the story that his fellow penguins really value him as a leader, and Captain Commando would be the one to teach him that. Right? I was just doing shit like that for the whole stream, and I had a blast doing it. What was the fun thing with Pink Ostrich? Was it Boss Baby? Oh my god, you have such a good memory. So yeah, I included Pink Ostrich from Battle Circuit, who has a girl named Paula Abdul, not kidding, riding her. Pink Ostrich is the name of the ostrich. Um or maybe the ostrich's name is Pinky. Anyway, the girl riding her, the ostrich is a girl ostrich. A little girl rides her. The girl's name is actually Paula Abdul. Paula is spelled differently. But still, yeah, in the story, I was gonna have the girl get captured, um, and then Boss Baby would ride the ostrich. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Although, really, I guess Boss Baby could also get in the mech that's piloted by the baby on Captain Commando's team. But anyway, yeah, that I think it was Boss Baby. I think you're right about that. But yeah, like I really like this roster because I added a lot of characters that hadn't like the guidelines I had for DreamWorks, I think made me come up with uh some really creative like roster picks that I haven't done in any other Capcom roster so far, you know, like yeah, what was it? The key mechanic was it was 2v2. The key mechanic was wishes, like a selectable buff that activates at a critical moment. But yeah, guidelines were characters with big personalities, characters that could kind of like, you know, like ham it up and like quip with each other and stuff, and also have a roster that's mostly family friendly. Um, you know, DreamWorks has room for darkness and adult jokes and stuff, but like, you know, every character kind of has to most of the cast has to be like kind of family friendly to a degree. Um, they have to be like, you know, a kid has to like kind of be able to see them doing their thing without getting too traumatized. Um, and yeah, from that, like, uh, I had Jeddah and the wolf from Puss in Boots as the bosses was a rad idea. Yeah, yeah, I had those two characters as the boss characters for this roster. Every roster I did, two characters in the base roster were like the bosses, where they would individually be playable, and show up and be like antagonists in the story, but then they would team up with each other to create a non-playable final boss. Kind of like uh Sigma and Ultron in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I think that's one of the things that game did right in a very short list. Um, but yeah, because like I also had Ratha and Ryder from Monster Hunter Stories. That's the only time I've done that so far. Um, this is this is the only this is the only versus Capcom roster so far to have my favorite character Dan Hibiki in it. My favorite Capcom character, Dan Hibiki, he's in it as DLC because I think his goofy ass would be perfect in a DreamWorks game, and I did not do that for selfish reasons, or at least I tried not to. Um, and you know, yeah, like I made sure to uh include some classics on the DreamWorks side, like, you know, we got Megamind here. Um, yeah, honestly, the more I look at this roster, the more I remember like thinking it's great and really liking it. So so if I were to add a character on the DreamWorks side, this is a character from a movie that hadn't released, and I think maybe barely even had like media for it. Like I think a trailer wasn't even out for this movie yet when I put this roster together. But I think the character I would add is Roz, aka the Wild Robot from the Wild Robot. Um, I've heard that this movie, I haven't watched this movie yet, but I've heard that it's phenomenal, and really charming. Um, it's, you know, it's directed by the guy that did Lilo and Stitch, who is also the voice of Stitch. Um, and yeah, it seems like a good character design. And it could do cool robot stuff, and I'm sure, like, you know, I think it like teams up with animals and stuff, and maybe it can incorporate that into its move set. Um, yeah, I I feel like this would be a good addition. Other characters I thought of on the DreamWorks side is the Wolf from the Bad Guys, and I feel like Wolf would like kind of have his heist teammates in his move set, you know, um, especially since that movie's getting a sequel this year. Um, and like in terms of how I'd make room, um, like I didn't. One thing that like I've kind of had to begrudgingly admit to myself is that um as much of a soft spot as I have for um as much of a soft spot as I have for Rise of the Guardians, um two characters from that movie that hasn't been touched in all that time is probably too many because I had Jack Frost, the main character, but I also had Pitch Black, the main villain. And honestly, I think what I might what I might do if I were to redo this is that I would keep Pitch Black in the roster, but I would remove Jack Frost. Um and Pitch Black would just be kind of like, by being the only Rise of the Guardians rep, I think he'd feel even more like kind of like a left field like deep cut pick, you know? Um so that's what I'd do there. Um Yeah, that's what I do there to make room for Roz. But maybe I should even also remove Jack Frost to uh to make room for the wolf from the bad guys also, because I think if this game came out in the next couple of years, Wolf from the bad guys would be in the roster. On the Capcom side, um I like having rivalries in this game, and if I'm putting a good robot in the roster, I should also put um an evil robot in the roster. So I'd put in Grandmaster Mayo from the Strider series. Yeah, this is the bad guy from Strider. He shows up in all the Strider games, and like he shows up in his spooky little android cyborg body and shoots lasers, and like he could be really this really intimidating like zoner character, basically. Just this guy who just fills the screen with electric balls and electricity and stuff. I think it'd be cool. Although I'm just realizing now, does Strider ever show up in this roster? No. But that's okay. Because I just decided that maybe Pitch Black would be in this game without his hero. um I should also probably make room for Strider. I think Strider would be great in Dreamworks versus Capcom, actually. But I don't know who I'd remove to make room, because I like all of the Capcom characters here. Yeah, yeah, that's tough. Like, I think if I had to remove a character, it'd be Franziska von Karma, maybe, and that just feels wrong. Yeah, that feels terrible. I'd hate to do that. I'd hate to remove her. Um. So anyway, yeah, I think DreamWorks vs. Capcom is an underrated roster of mine. I'd love this to get more views. Like, yeah, I guess another thing I feel like this roster is missing is like I already have three Kung Fu Panda characters in the base roster. Um I got Poe, obviously. Um, I got Tigress, right? And I got Tai Lung as kind of the Akuma. Um, but honestly, I feel like there should also be a fourth Kung Fu Panda character, like in the DLC, right? Like I think either the Peacock bad guy from the second movie or the Chameleon bad guy from the fourth movie, uh, would be would be really good picks as another like Kung Fu Panda rep. Oh, for Kung Fu Panda, would I replace one of them for the new protagonist they added in Kung Fu Panda 4? Zhen, played by Aquafina. I think the Aquafina Fox is that a Fox character, like a Fennec Fox or something? I think the Aquafina Fox character is a good contender for DLC. Um, like I would not replace her. I would not replace Poe or Tigress or Tai Lung with her. I think all three of those characters remain more important than her. Um, and I think the two villains I mentioned would be cooler than adding her if I only had one more Kung Fu Panda slot. Um, but I think she is the character that deserves to be in the game the sixth most, right? After those other five characters, if there's still room, yeah, she should be in it. But I do say that as someone that hasn't watched Kung Fu Panda 4, and maybe her moveset would be really cool, and I don't realize that yet. This is a solid roster, but you do think getting rid of Jack Frost for Roz is a good idea. And something I probably would have done had the Wild Robot existed when this came out. Yeah, maybe I don't want to give myself that much credit. Maybe I wouldn't have had that idea at the time, but after thinking about it for a while, I did have that idea. Um, yeah, yeah, I like this roster a lot. Max, if you ever see this, this is for you, buddy. Love you. Um, Max is my friend that requested that I do this, but I don't think he's watched me put together the roster yet. He's a busy guy. Still love him. So, um, so the next one, I'll probably be doing this for a little while, but you know what? I, I do love talking my versus Capcom rosters, and it's nice that I put this much work in and I can get more like discussion out of it. I don't mind doing this actually. Um, but I am lost in my scenes list on OBS. Where am I? Here I am. All right. A lot of the following rosters are like neck and neck. Like DreamWorks versus Capcom, eighth place with 159 views. Seventh place, Netflix versus Capcom with 161 views. It's ahead of DreamWorks versus Capcom by 2 views. But let's pull this up. So, um, when this was suggested to me by my friend and fan Garrett D, I thought like when I first heard Netflix versus Capcom, I'm like, oh, that's a stupid idea. That's not really doable. That's not a feasible roster. I don't think you could really do that. There's too many Netflix properties that are owned by other people that wouldn't really play ball for this kind of thing. But then I started thinking of all the people that would play ball for this kind of thing that have Netflix shows. And, like shows that are owned by Netflix and tied into Netflix's identity. Um, and I managed to come up with a 42 character roster with that. And and I think Netflix's vibe really allowed me to again come up with a pretty unique and creative roster on the Capcom side. Let me pull up these guidelines again. Yeah. Uh Format was 2v2. The key mechanic I didn't really put much thought into. I'm like, traumatic event. You get a buff when your partner is KO'd because people that die tragically in Netflix stuff. But yeah, the character guidelines were characters that were gritty and dark. Pick a lot of characters from M-rated games and also have characters that are realistic, you know, on the Capcom side. Like characters that are more grounded and like basically could be played in live action essentially, with some exceptions. Like I wasn't fully taking fantastical or unrealistic characters off the table, but I decided to stay with like a roster of characters that are like pretty grounded for Capcom, right? And yeah, I think one thing that was cool was being able to like, obviously Netflix's darling, Netflix's biggest property is Stranger Things. So like it was fun to like, put 11 um and Hopper and Vecna as, as the Netflix boss. Uh just putting them on that side and being like, "Oh, hey, their rivals wouldn't be the Street Fighter cast. You wouldn't see 11 versus Ryu on the box art. The characters that would interact with the Stranger Things characters are Resident Evil characters like Jill Valentine and Leon Kennedy and Lady Dimitrescu, um, who is not the Netflix boss, who's not the Capcom boss. Whoa, oh, okay. Um, the uh, the Capcom boss was Fortinbras from Onimusha. Um, just took damage from seeing bad box art Mega Man again a little. Yeah, like I try to add like kind of goofy like left field characters in each of my rosters. And for Netflix, the goofy character for Capcom, the goofy character was bad box art Mega Man. And on the Netflix side, um that was Tim Robinson as an amalgamation of the characters he plays in his sketches in I Think You Should Leave. Which I'm still very proud of that idea. Um Other kind of left field characters I was really proud of. Like one thing I liked is that yeah, like Stranger Things and Street Fighter weren't rivals, right? Stranger Things and Resident Evil were rivals, and Street Fighter was rivals uh with fucking Cobra Kai, right? Like Ryu and Chun Li were fighting fucking Johnny Lawrence and and Daniel LaRusso, right? And then I also put Rainbow Mika in here. I think that's the only time I've put her in a versus Capcom roster so far, and made her rival Zoya the Destroyer from Glow. But other inclusions I'm kind of proud of. I have a character from Love, Death, and Robots in here. Fucking Carnivore from like the kaiju like bar fight episode. who's rivals with fucking Zinogre from Monster Hunter, and they would definitely have like a pit fight in the story. Um, fucking Roxette from the video game VR sex episode of Black Mirror, the fighting game VR sex episode. This is this is also the roster that uh the only roster so far that I've put um Pragmata guy in his DLC. Uh and we still don't know if that game's ever going to come out. I wonder if we'll hear something about it this year. Anyway, yeah, this this honestly is like this might be my favorite roster that I've done. Um like I think it really does feel like what Netflix and Capcom would put together if they, um if they were to collaborate. But I do think that I do have a glaring absence on the Netflix side, and I do have a glaring absence on the Capcom side. So if I had room for one more character on each side, I would remedy that. The way I would remedy that on the Netflix side is to add the front man from Squid Game. Um, when I put this roster together, I'm like, I don't think there's any character from Squid Game that makes sense as a fighting game character. So I would just remedy that by putting a Squid Game stage in the game. That was my justification. Um, After watching season 2 of Squid Game, I've realized I was wrong about that. And that I was probably still wrong about that when season 1 came out. Um, I think I think you could make a decent move set out of the guy that runs the Squid Games. Like basically make him kind of a summoner character, have him call out uh, you know, like have him use moves where like he calls out the guys in the pink jumpsuits with guns, like have him call them out as part of his move set. Um, he'll have a super move where if like it's a counter super where he'll like, he'll press a button, and if the opponent moves, then the porcelain doll girl notice from the red light green light game notices that the opponent moved, and then the opponent just gets like shot down. um Frontman can also have some command grabs, and like season 2 just came out, so I'm not gonna have any spoilers for season 2. um but some of the things that Frontman does in season 2 did make me realize that, yeah, this guy has potential for a fighting game moveset. And honestly, like a Squid Game representative in a game like this is necessary. If Netflix does a collaboration with Capcom, if Netflix versus Capcom ever exists, a a Squid Game character is necessary. And I think Gi Hun, the protagonist, does have potential as a playable character also. But I think if there's only one Squid Game rep, I think Frontman's good. I think Frontman's a good pick. You hadn't seen that episode of Black Mirror when I made this, so when I said that Anthony Mackie has gay VR sex, it caught you off guard. Well, it's what happens. I don't want to tell you. Anthony Mackie has gay VR sex, and the episode's kind of good. It's a kind of a good episode. Um. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, I'd rectify that mistake. I would put Honestly, I do not want to. Well, okay, yeah, I know who I would remove actually. When I initially made the roster, um, I was like, hee hee, haha, I'm so clever. Uh, Netflix has a Resident Evil Netflix series, um, with that adds an original character named Jade Wesker who's never shown up in any of the Resident Evil games. So she could show up as a she could show up as a Netflix rep and I'd make her DLC. Wouldn't that be funny? I as clever an idea as it was, as much as I was patting myself on the back for that idea, I think what I would do is, yeah, I would put frontman in the base roster. Um and I think I would take Rayla from the Dragon Prince, and move her from the base roster into season 1 of DLC. Callum from Dragon Prince would stay in the base roster, but he would be the only Dragon Prince rep in the base roster. I'd make Rayla season 1 DLC. Um, I would move John Kreese from season 1 DLC to season 2 DLC, and then I would remove Jade Wesker from the roster altogether. Um, yeah, that's what I'd do to make room for the front man if I had to make room and I didn't just get an extra slot. The mistake I would rectify on the Capcom side is this. So at the time that I made the Netflix versus Capcom roster, I was like, it's like Frank West is a character that fills the criteria. He's like an edgy, he's a gritty character. He's from an M-rated game. He's pretty grounded. You know, he deals with zombies, but in kind of a grounded way. Um, but at the time I was putting this roster together, I was like, man, Dead Rising really fell off in popularity and sales. I think Capcom really wanted to be Dead Rising to be big for a while, but it looks like they are burying that franchise and we aren't going to hear or see anything from those games for a long time. That was my thought when I put together Netflix versus Capcom. And then um and then they released a remake of the first game last year. And gave Frank West a new character design. This is the new character design, I think. I think this is how he looks in the remake. Um and then I realized, oh, they're not done. They're not done trying to make Dead Rising a thing. So Frank West would 100% be in this game. He fits this game. He fits Netflix versus Capcom perfectly. He'd slide right in. um and if I had to remove a character, I don't know, probably um probably the Arisen from Dragon's Dogma / Dragon's Dogma 2. Um like, you know, I think like at the time I made this roster, like Dragon's Dogma 2 hadn't come out yet, and obviously it was getting a lot of marketing and stuff. It felt like it felt like Capcom would put a lot of emphasis on Dragon's Dogma 2 stuff. But the game's out and it sold pretty well, but I think I don't know. I get the vibe that maybe the Arisen wouldn't be in this game. And also like it's kind of a boring pick, just aesthetically it's a knight. It's a knight in armor. Like, like I'm sure they could have cool moveset stuff going on for it, but I think I think I would rather swap out the Arisen for Frank West, which is a crazy thing to say, but here we are. Yeah. Yeah, I think Netflix versus Capcom is kind of my favorite roster I put together. Uh like yeah, I think Netflix versus Capcom, since it's so low on the popularity scale of my versus Capcom rosters, I think it's the underrated list. I think it's the underrated roster. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I think I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of this roster. I think I did a good job. Capcom will keep putting Frank in all their versus games until morale improves. But what if that's the reason that morale hasn't improved? You ever think of that, Capcom? Okay, let's see. Sixth place. Sixth place, and again, a lot of these are pretty close to each other. Um, Sixth place is Konami versus Capcom, 176 views. Not too far off, honestly. Not too far off. What's funny is that this has been kind of climbing up lately. This has been getting like kind of a spike in views lately. I have no idea why, but there we are. Here it is. Um, and yeah, I think this is just like a solid roster. I think this is a pretty fun roster to put together. You know, I think the funniest thing I did, and this is the first and only time I've done this so far, um, is that I added a character that is both a Konami and Capcom rep simultaneously, which is Gear Rex from fucking Metal Gear Peace Walker, uh, which had a Monster Hunter collaboration in it, and they came up with an original monster that was based off of Metal Gear Rex. And it's like shit. This is both a Konami character and a Capcom character. I'm gonna put in the roster, and it's gonna be smack dab in the middle of it. Um, and yeah, I let's see, what were the guidelines for this again? Right, 2v2 format, key mechanic sub items, limited use items that function as assist moves. That's a fun idea. I should have come up with like some examples besides, I'm sure I said the holy water, but anyway. Yeah, the character guidelines were to cover a wide range of IPs, current IPs, dormant IPs, deep cuts, and have a mix of fun and quirky and cool slash badass slash edgy. And yeah, I feel like I did a pretty good job with that, honestly. Okay, we got Street Fighter characters and Darkstalkers characters. We got Castlevania characters. Um, got we got Bill Reiser from Contra up here. Uh, Luca Blight from Suikoden. Yeah, like it's a good mix over like we got what Hikaru and Akane from Parodius. We got Got Oolong from ER Kung Fu. We got Zack and Wiki. I think that's the first time, maybe the last so far, that I've ever added Zack and Wiki. Um, Frank West is here. That's appropriate. And lots of Kojima characters and stuff. You got Snake and Revolver Ocelot and Raiden. You got Psycho Mantis as DLC. You got Senator Armstrong as DLC. You've got Jehuti from Zone of the Enders. You got Castlevania characters. You got Gene from God Hand and Regina from Dino Crisis. Yeah, and you got a good mix of uh got like retro stuff in here too. I see like Sparkster um from 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 Konami in here, but also Arthur from Capcom. Yeah. Yeah, I like this. I like this roster. I think it's a fun roster. I think it's got a good mix of IPs from both sides, big and small. Yeah, if I were to add characters, make room, etc., um, add one character from each side, I would do a better job acknowledging a pre-existing Konami and Capcom collaboration. I thought at the time it's like this is too niche of a reference. But the more I thought about it, I was like, no, I want to make the reference. So on the Capcom side, I would swap out regular Mega Man and put in Mega Man.exe instead. Um, yeah, I put Mega Man.exe in instead. Um, and and that is because on the Konami side, I would put Django from Boktai. Um, this is another Kojima character. Um, but honestly, I do think that Konami wouldn't give a shit. I think they'd be like, you know what? No, we're taking all of Kojima's properties and making money off of them, as we have done and will continue to do. So Django is from a series of Game Boy Advance and DS games called Boktai, um, where like the cartridges had like a little like solar sensor, and you would actually uh sometimes to progress in the game you would have to hold your system up to the sun to get solar energy. um and I think you had to do that to like charge your weapon. It was nuts, but what's even more nuts is that uh there were collaboration events between Boktai and Mega Man Battle Network. uh like, if you like I think like if you I think there was stuff where like if you played uh like a Battle Network game on the DS with like a Boktai cartridge in the GBA slot, like you'd get to play like a special mission in both games or something. It was nut shit like that, like Django, like Boktai had there were Boktai games with Mega Man Battle Network content in them where Django would meet Mega Man EXE and vice versa. And and yeah, it was absolutely wild. Both characters were different genres from different time periods, but these characters did like Mega Man EXE and Django did like team up. So, what I would do there is have them be rivals and have them like recognize each other. Uh have them, they're in the context of Konami versus Capcom, their adventures together would be canon, and they would interact and refer to the adventures they had together. I thought at the time that was a little too niche to do, but fuck it. Fuck it. Maybe it's a good idea actually. Maybe that's fun. Maybe I should let things be fun. Um my fiance's home. You could progress without sunlight, but charging energy was easier with it, as making the game impossible to beat without it would be insane, lol. Well, the game felt impossible to beat without the sun. Like when I played that game and it was nighttime, that game felt just too hard to the point that I thought it was like actually impossible. Um but yeah, I think it was a fun roster. Yeah, like I honestly, like, it's one of those rosters that I'd be happy if it existed. And I feel like it's within the realm of possibility. Konami loves milking their franchises. The problem is that, like, I feel like Capcom is looking for someone that would foot the bill for some of the development on a versus Capcom game, and I don't think Konami would bite. I think they'd be like, "No, Capcom, you pay for the production of that game, and we will give you our licenses." Anyway, 1 second before I continue. Uno momento. Okay, I'm back. You'd love to see Goemon again in literally anything? Yeah, I think if Konami vs. Capcom did exist, I think a Goemon reference is almost a given. Um, so yeah, now we're in the top five. My top five performing versus Capcom streams on YouTube. So fifth place at the end of the top five is Hasbro versus Capcom. with 194 views. That's almost 200. We're almost at 200 views with Hasbro versus Capcom. This is another one that's kind of been like just slowly but surely like creeping up the list, you know? Like that's just like been getting like suddenly weirdly just like a few views every day, you know, and just getting like a strange amount of attention for these months old roster building videos. Hasbro versus Capcom is another roster that I had a lot of fun with because I came up with a unique mechanic for this one, and you know, it it informed the roster in a way that made the Capcom side really unique. Um, so the Hasbro guidelines, um, it would be another 2v2. It's funny, I feel like all the ones that I decided were 2v2 are the ones that are like performing worse than the 3v3 rosters. I wonder if that's I wonder if there's anything to that. But the key mechanic was giant characters. Some characters are huge and have more health and armor, like Tatsunoko versus Capcom's Giants, but better. Because I had realized at the time like that a lot of Hasbro IPs were like characters that were gigantic, that were much bigger than humans. Um, and I noticed that Capcom also had uh plenty of big characters of their own. So I was like, what if instead of Tatsunoko versus Capcom's thing where if you do a giant character, that's your only character, and also they kind of suck, and also there's only two in the entire roster. Um what if giant characters were a third of the roster? Uh and what if like your roster could have up to one giant character in it, but it wouldn't decrease the maximum amount of characters you could have, you know? Um like you would still get to pick two characters. It's just that only one of them could be a giant character. Um so yeah, the character guidelines were a variety of IPs and franchises. Makes sense because Capcom and Hasbro have both. Characters that would be cool toys and or action figures on the Capcom side. I think that was a fun prerequisite, and a third of the roster should be giant characters. Two versus two performing worse, just like Marvel Infinite. Oh no, you're right. It's like the prophecy. Quick question: would Stretch Armstrong be able to inflate himself to switch between regular and giant? That's a fun idea. Um, I did have I did have in kind of the DLC, I had Bumblebee and Lady Dimitrescu as kind of like hybrid giant characters. Like they were technically regular sized characters, but there were instances in which they could kind of count as giants. So I guess you could kind of do that with Stretch too. That never occurred to me. You just saw Gloppy again. Yeah, so over in the DLC, I included Gloppy from Candyman as one of the giant Candyland is one of the giant characters. Candyman is a whole different thing than Candyland. Um, yes, Gloppy are one of our Hasbro non-binary icons. Um, Alongside Murph, the mass of sentient mass of Nerf darts that also shoots Nerf darts. Uh, yeah, this is a fun roster. This is a fun roster to come up with. Um, yeah, and because I did the whole giant characters thing, Um, there were lots of Capcom characters that I hadn't put in any of my rosters up to this point, and then didn't put in any of my subsequent rosters because in most of the other rosters, they'd be too big. Would Tyson Super be him parting the seas with his Beyblade? Oh yeah, Tyson Granger from Beyblade over in the Hasbro DLC. The answer is no because Tyson doesn't do that. Moses does that. Moses from the Bible had a Beyblade in Bible times, and he parted the Red Sea. No, not the Red Sea, but just parted the seas. Was the sea red? I don't know. I haven't picked up a Bible in a hot minute. Because I stopped believing in Bibles. Um, uh, my fiance is doing kind little things for me, like refilling my hand sanitizer. He's very sweet, even as he grumbles and shakes his head as he walks away from me and glares at me as I narrate his actions. And then he walks back in my direction and hands me the hand sanitizer, shaking his. Okay, I'm done. He's very sweet. I love him very much. But yeah, Hasbro versus Capcom. Yeah, yeah, I was able to add lots of fun Capcom characters to the roster. What's actually funny is that like some of the some of the Capcom character debuts weren't even giant characters. Like I put one fun one is I put fucking Mariah from the Capcom developed Dungeons and Dragons game. Um because like is this character owned by Hasbro? We're not sure. But it wouldn't matter if Hasbro and Capcom teamed up. They would allow her use either way for this game. So like hooray. And yeah, like I had also as a non-giant character I had fucking like Pyron from Darkstalkers. I don't think I've put him in any other ones. Um I still think that's a pretty cool pick. But yeah, then also like the Yellow Devil is like a giant character on the Capcom side, like near Gigante from oops. Why does it look the way it does? Near Gigante from Monster Hunter. Um oop. Uh yeah, I think I came up with a really fun roster here. Yeah, like Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, Transformers, some of the board games, right? We got fucking Miss Scarlet from Clue up in here. Oh god, that Miss Scarlet design is still so good. That's like the most recent one. I'm gonna be really sad actually if they release a post-Trump version of Clue that makes her white again. That's gonna that's gonna be weirdly depressing. That's actually gonna bum me out if that happens. Um But yeah, I'm very proud of this roster. I think yeah, I think there's a non-zero chance of something like this existing one day, you know, like Hasbro and Capcom do collaborate a weird amount of times. Um, you know, there was a Street Fighter collab with Magic the Gathering not too long ago. The Dungeons and Dragons Capcom game hasn't been pulled from storefronts like since the re-release in 2013. Like that game hasn't had licensing issues in 12 years. That's crazy. Um but yeah, if I were to make room um if I were to make room or if I had room for one more character on each side, I think the characters I'd pick would have to be giant characters. Um just because coming up with giant characters is so fun. On the Hasbro side, I would include Discord from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Discord is a big ass like I don't know, kind of goat like llama like snake chicken man thing. He's voiced by Q from Star Trek The Next Generation. And basically he's like a trickster god, basically. He's the trickster god of the My Little Pony universe, and he has like reality warping powers and like, you know, um he sorry, my dog's having a big drink of water and I don't want the mic to pick it up. Uh he is a emote. And he's initially a really intimidating force in the My Little Pony universe. But I think eventually he's kind of an ally to the group. I think by the end of the series he's just like dating Fluttershy or something. Anyway, but I think him and his power set would be really cool as a giant character in Hasbro versus Capcom. He has a banger ass fan song. That's interesting. Um, Fluttershy and Discord are BFFs. Oh, okay. I for some reason I when I looked into it, I thought they had like a romance, but I guess that's just people like fan shipping them or whatever. Like I know that Pinkie Pie ended up with Weird Al as a pony. So like I didn't even blink when I heard that Discord and Fluttershy were together because like because Weird Al as a pony like impregnated Pinkie Pie and had two kids with her. So like nothing no pairing is going to be weirder than that even if it's a goat chicken snake god with a Pegasus girl. That's less weird than Weird Al fathering Pinkie Pie's children. Um anyway, I've gotten distracted. I've gotten distracted. Discord, I think, is like a shoe in. Um you don't like that sentence I just said? I didn't like that sentence either. I'm sometimes I'm burdened with delivering truths to this chat, okay? It's not something I take pleasure in. It's just my obligation to deliver you these truths. Um yeah, if I were to put Discord in the Hasbro vs. Capcom roster, I think one is the correct number of My Little Pony reps in the base roster. I think just Twilight Sparkle in there is fine. Discord would probably be DLC. Um and Honestly, I really like Gloppy and Discord as like giant DLC options, you know? So really, I guess it's just like in this case, I'd just be like, hey, what if we add Discord as like a bonus DLC character after the season passes are done, you know? Because I don't want to, yeah, I don't want to remove any of these characters, honestly. Um, on the Capcom side, um, as a giant character, I would add Astaroth from Ghosts and Goblins, uh, who's like the big freaky dude with the purple head, but also the face on his chest and like torso that can like breathe fire. Yeah, like man, no matter which version of Astaroth you pick, he's pretty freaky looking. This version of him has kind of like a bug face, which is interesting. But yeah, like when I made this roster initially, Astaroth didn't occur to me, but then when Astaroth occurred to me after the fact, it's like, oh man, yeah, like Astaroth from Ghosts and Goblins would be a great giant character, just this big imposing dude breathing fire out of his belly and like, just like, just doing fucking giant like vampire bugman shit. I don't know. It'd be cool. It'd be cool, and it'd even be nice to find an excuse to put Arthur there in the roster somewhere to like fight him. Astaroth I would put in the base roster. Um Honestly, I think the Capcom side of the base roster has too many robots in it, you know? Like too many giant robots. Like cuz we have like, like Yellow Devil aesthetically isn't really a giant robot, but like isn't very robotic, but Yellow Devil is a giant robot. Um and then you also have Devilot and her robot, and you have G Kaiser from Tech Romancer. Um, the the only giant characters on the Capcom side that aren't big robots are Wizen, who is like, I don't know, a god or demigod, I guess, and Nergigante, who is a big dragon, big monster, big dragon. Um, and especially I think since Hasbro has it kind of has to have at least three giant robots by necessity, you know, like you need a Power Rangers robot. Optimus Prime is mandatory. Megatron is mandatory, right? So I think what I would do is I think uh I think G Kaiser I would move to DLC and then put Astaroth in the base roster. Um yeah, that's what I'd probably do for Hasbro versus Capcom. And then maybe as fun as it was to make PTX 48 from Tatsunoko versus Capcom a returning character, maybe remove that from the DLC so there's room for G Kaiser. Was Gotcha Force considered for robots or are they too small? Gotcha Force. Oh man, I forgot about Gotcha Force. Um, if I'm remembering right, Gotcha Force was a weird thing where Capcom published it in the States, but they don't actually own the IP. Let me double check that real quick. Gotcha Force 2003 video game. No, Capcom developed it too. Um, In March 2012, Capcom reprinted copies for the GameCube in Japan 9 years after its original release, which stirred talk of a possible future sequel, which did not happen. Which did not happen. Huh. Maybe I should maybe I should look into Gacha Force when if I ever do more of these versus Capcom rosters. Um I think like I think I have seen Gacha Force on like lists of Capcom games before, but somehow just like overlooked it each time. I kind of felt like even even fans of Capcom deep cuts weren't really talking about Gacha Force, so I just kind of ignored it. That's a great that's a great pull. That's a great pull. Uh no, I didn't consider Gacha Force. But yeah, Hasbro versus Capcom. I think I'm pretty happy with this one. Hopefully it keeps doing better. I feel I feel like if any of my versus Capcom videos like get discovered really late and suddenly blow up, it's gonna be Hasbro versus Capcom for some reason, you know? Like I think my videos have like two chances of blowing up, basically, right? One, if like one of these games actually gets announced at one point, people will be searching for roster talk of it and find my old video and watch it. Um uh but I think the second opportunity is like has Hasbro fans, I think, are just kind of that brand of fans that'll just like look for any discussion of Hasbro stuff and stumble upon my video. I think that's why it's been getting like these incremental views over time. Um and I feel like I feel like one day a Hasbro fan will find it and inadvertently spread it to other members of the Hasbro community. But but you know, I guess at this point I'm just writing fanfic for myself. um so yeah, moving on, I guess. Yeah, so that's fifth place. Um so this is obviously uh the last one, the last one to have less than 200 views. Fourth place is Square Enix versus Capcom with 275 views. Kind of a jump, actually. Kind of a jump. Um, yeah, Square Enix versus Capcom. This is actually one of the this is actually one of the rosters that was really stressful for me to put together at the time because like there were just too many options, you know? Like each company has such a big roster of characters, such a big like catalog of characters and franchises, you know? Like like Square Enix has made more Final Fantasy games than I have slots in the base roster. Uh and they've made more franchises than I have Square Enix slots in the whole thing, you know, like and you know, some of these franchises are so big that they need multiple slots, so like I was sweating. I was sweating real hard. Uh Oh, um, gonna jump back one sec. To Hasbro versus Capcom because I did have one other note for things I would fix. Um, I have Astarion here as DLC for Hasbro. Um, yeah, that was silly of me to do. Astarion would easily absolutely be in the base roster. Um, I think I think Drizdo Erden in as the DLC slot is actually more likely to be DLC. Um, and in fact, I could see him not showing up in the game at all and being replaced with another Baldur's Gate 3 character like Karlach. Like I think Astarion and Karlach would be cool. Um anyway, yeah, I'm ready to talk about Square Enix versus Capcom now. So yeah, this was a really tough roster to come up with. But I did it. I did it and I was never really fully satisfied with it. Um you're still so happy to see Bub and Bob in the Square Enix roster. Like I said, space is precious on the base roster, so it's great to see some Bubble Bubble love. Also Gex. Yeah, like Gex both felt like something I had to put in the base roster to make it feel like, like kind of wild. Um but also like was was so stressful to put in over like, over so many of Square Enix's like bigger, more prolific franchises. Like yeah, like what I have six Final Fantasy characters in the base roster. Three of them are Final Fantasy VII characters because they kind of gotta be. Um, one thing I do kind of like about this roster is that I put a bunch of Breath of Fire characters on the Capcom side. Um, right, let me pull up the guidelines. Also, I mentioned Bub and Bob and Gex, so let me just oh, look, it's Bub and Bob. And look, it's Gex. Oh man, that was a funny icon that I made. Right, so the Square Enix guidelines. This was a 3v3, and here it is in the top four. Um, yeah, this was a 3v3. The key mechanic was summons, like you get a powerful assist once per round. Some of these would be like actual summons from Final Fantasy, but you'd also have like, you know, like big ass characters from the Capcom side, like maybe Monster Hunter monsters and stuff. The character guidelines were anime vibes on both sides, weapons and characters with weapons and magic users, and also characters from RPGs and characters that had level up mechanics on the Capcom side. So one thing I did was I added a bunch of uh I had a bunch of Breath of Fire characters. Like Ryu from Breath of Fire 3, like Nina from Breath of Fire 1, like Fo Lu from Breath of Fire 4, which I did put in other rosters because I think his design fucking rules and he'd have a cool move set. Um I even put Cat from Breath of Fire 2 in the DLC so that uh a character would represent. There'd be a character representing each of the first four Breath of Fire games. I thought that was fun. But yeah, I keep forgetting to mention like bosses and stuff. But in this one, Gil was the boss character on the Street Fighter on the Capcom side, and of course, fucking Sephiroth was the boss on the Square Enix side. And yeah, I think I came up with a good mix. I had a bunch of like kind of fun like conniving like villains on each side. Like I kind of imagined like a league of like spooky villains, forming in this game. Because you also got like Xehanort from Kingdom Hearts, and you got fucking Wesker from Resident Evil. Yeah, bunch of spooky villains. Um, yeah. If I were to, if I had room for one more character on each side, um, Square Enix again was really really hard. I almost picked Aqua from Kingdom Hearts because I feel like more Kingdom Hearts reps would make sense. But I think I felt too much guilt over not having enough characters that weren't from either Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, or Kingdom Hearts. So I decided to diversify the portfolio a bit more and include Reese from Trials of Mana. I think a Mana character deserves to be in the game. So like I try to find room for her somehow in the base roster. Um, you know, she'd have like kind of cool dragoon stuff going on. Um, which I don't think anyone else in the base roster is doing. Yeah, I mean, Cat from Breath of Fire has a staff, but still different. You think your only thing with this is that there's no "The World Ends with You" rep? You think I could replace one Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest character for Neku? Um, Honestly, Neku was my second choice after Reese. Um, or rather, I feel like the characters fighting for this extra slot were Reese, then Aqua from Kingdom Hearts, then Neku from The World Ends with You. It was very close between all three of them. Um, but Reese has the history, you know. Um, like Reese has like the World Ends with You is is a franchise that kind of gets snubbed by Square Enix. Um, Mana is a franchise that that keeps popping up for Square Enix. It feels like it has more weight than The World Ends with You. There's also Star Ocean. Um, Welch Vineyard almost got this spot also. It was God, this game like it's so hard. This roster in particular is so hard and it always stresses me out. On the Capcom side, I struggled less with deciding on Nero from Devil May Cry. Like he's a character with anime vibes and a cool weapon. Devil May Cry is like one of Capcom's biggest franchises. I think uh I think he deserves to be in the roster like pretty easily. After how the sales of Neo 12 we went, after how the sales of Neo The World Ends with You, I call The World Ends with You 12 sometimes, and I think I'm the only one who does. But yeah, after how the sales of Neo The World Ends with You went, this might be your last chance to see Neku. That's not a bad point. My condolences. Um, but yeah, I think Nero on the Capcom side find room for him in the base roster somehow because Honestly, I think him fighting against Square Enix characters would look really cool and make a lot of sense. Uh, but yeah, I guess like I guess this somehow is my fourth most viewed versus Capcom video. I think what's funny is that like I feel like generally uh my most viewed videos are the ones that can manage to generate discourse, you know? Um like people in the comments telling me what I did wrong and this one actually like had some very polite people being like, "Hey, I think you did a great job with the limitations you set for yourself. But I do think you kind of did the roster a disservice by not including X character or Y character." Like Square Enix fans that watched this video were actually very nice about how I fucked up. Um and uh and I think that's very sweet. Like, yeah, what's some of the feedback I got? Uh Yeah, great concept, though I was hoping you'd lean a little bit less on Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Kingdom Hearts. Perhaps a second session of DLC could have been used to show up a couple more newer Square franchises like Octopath and Star Ocean. Yeah, like, that's not unfair, but I replied letting him know that like, hey, yeah, that's a great point, but I do think that uh that Square Enix would have too many Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Kingdom Hearts characters, and I, built the roster based on what they would do. You're surprised I went with Dragon Quest One hero and not Erdrick or the Dragon Quest Five hero, as those are the popular ones. Um, is Dragon Quest Five one of the popular ones? Like, I love Dragon Quest Five, but I didn't realize that hero was so popular. Erdrick is a great point, especially now that the three remake is out. Um, but the route I decided to go with the Dragon Quest hero is like I basically want him to be like there's other like aesthetics for the Dragon Quest hero. Like there are versions of the game where he looks more adult, but I wanted to go with like the Dragon Quest like in this game the Dragon Quest hero would have this chibi art style and basically be like a silent protagonist and be like cute, be like kind of adorable and animated and almost like kind of childlike in his heroism. Like that's I wanted to represent those aspects of Dragon Quest, and I thought that might be the most fun way to do that. So that's why you hear 5 is often considered one of, if not the best one in the series, along with like 3, 8, and 11. Um, yeah, I also agree that 5 is one of the best. Um, but like I think if this makes sense, I think Dragon Quest V is kind of the Final Fantasy 9 of Dragon Quest, where um where you definitely have a crowd of people saying it's the best, but it's a smaller crowd. Like it's kind of like the dark horse option, you know? Like it's like it's a pick that has a crowd, but it's not a popular pick. That's always the vibe I got with 5. Is that like there are people saying like, yeah, it's the best, but like if you like if you pulled like a million Dragon Quest fans, 5 would not be in the top 3, maybe not even the top 5. Um which is kind of how we feel about Final Fantasy 9, although I feel like there's a lot more not Final Fantasy 9 fans now than there were when I was a Final Fantasy 9 fan. So I guess take that as you will. Um But yeah, then there was one other guy in the comments that's like, this is actually a great roster, but there's some over representation and missed opportunities. I think there is a bit too much Final Fantasy representation. I would get rid of Baltier and replace him with Fei Wong from Xenogears. And he actually edits my roster for like 4 paragraphs, but he does it like very like, he ends it with like, however, like I said, the roster you have is quite great already, just a bit too much Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy rep. So that's kind of the common complaint. But like, do you really think Square Enix would let this roster launch with less than 6 Final Fantasy characters? You think they'd let it launch with less than 3 Dragon Quest characters? I just don't think they would. So anyway, yes, this I think I'm very unsatisfied with this roster. It's the bane of my existence, but I do think it's kind of fun. uh, you know, I'm glad it's getting views at least. Xenogears would be rad, so you agree with that guy? Xenogears would be rad. I just don't have fucking room for Xenogears. I need to get out of this roster. I need to get out of here. How do I leave? Here we go. All right, so third place. We're in the top 3 now. And third pick has almost 300 views, but not quite. Third place is Sega versus Capcom with 295 views. It's funny, Square Enix was ahead of Sega for a long time. But then suddenly, like, I don't know, Square Enix started like stagnating in views, and Sega just like got like a boost for some reason. Um, and here we are, Sega versus Capcom. Um, yeah, Sega vs. Capcom was really fun to come up with for a lot of reasons that are probably obvious. Um like I think it's fun whenever Street Fighter isn't the main franchise that would have like a rivalry with the other company. Um and I just think Sonic versus Mega Man is is a really cool rivalry, and it was cool to have like Mega Man versus Sonic, Tron Bonne versus Amy Rose, Dr. Wily and Eggman are obviously the bosses on each side, and they team up to make some big stupid robot together. Um, but yeah, then you have some Yakuza rep, uh you have Persona characters. One thing I'm gonna say is that I made this roster before Metaphor ReFantasio came out, and I was like, you know what? By the time when Sega vs. Capcom comes out, Metaphor will have been out for a while, so I'm gonna pick the character I think is the coolest looking, and hope that that will make sense as the roster pick. Um, and I picked Hulkenberg. And you know what? I think I was right. I think I was right to pick Hulkenberg as the Metaphor Fantasia rep. Like, like, uh, yeah. I think she's the character that makes the most sense next to like the protagonist. I didn't want to just like do like, here's a protagonist from Persona 3, here's a protagonist from Persona 5, here's the protagonist from Metaphor. Um yeah, I think she'd like, now that I've played Metaphor, she'd have a great move set, and I think I made the right call there. Um and her having this Monster Hunter monster as her rival was also a right call. Um, and yeah, this is another roster that has like some fun characters that I haven't included otherwise on the Capcom side, like Jude from Star Gladiator, who like whose rival slash besties with the Ooh La La from Space Channel 5. Like, yeah, got like Shadow the Hedgehog as DLC and Zero's right next to him. Um, Goro Majima is the headlining like final DLC character for the Sega side. Um, this Exoprimal character becoming more and more of a deep cut by the day. uh, yeah. And like yeah, like this was big on rivalries. Some of my favorite rivalries were like Dante versus Bayonetta because they'd get to meet for the first time, and I think that's awesome. Um, and then of course Captain Commando versus Segata Sanshiro, the the mascot for the Sega Saturn, who's also like a real man. Um, Segata Sanshiro makes this an S tier roster. Fun fact, Sega Sanshiro is played by Hiroshi Fujioka, who is the original Kamen Rider in 1971. I did know that. Here's a couple other fun facts for you. His uh that actor's son is not only I think not only did he go on to do Kamen Rider acting, I think he showed up in a Kamen Rider thing, but also there was an ad campaign. um Sega did an ad campaign that was kind of a sequel to the Sega Sanshiro ad campaign, where Sega Sanshiro's actor's son played the son of Sega Sanshiro, who was basically like, you know, kind of a millennial slash zoomer like successor to the Sega Sanshiro name. Um and you know, he was more about like promoting Sega by looking like sexy and flashy and trendy instead of like by beating the shit out of people. Um and there that ad campaign even ended with like a big like epic commercial where like, you know, where Sagita Sanshiro reprises his role. Um it's crazy. That whole the whole saga of the Segata Sanshiro like ad campaigns plural is crazy. I love it. Um God, I got I got lost in the Segata sauce. Um oh yeah, fucking Silvaria from Valkyria Chronicles. Yeah, this is a cool roster. This is a cool roster, man. I do like this roster a lot. I think I did a pretty okay job on it. Um It's funny is I don't think this one had much discourse. I don't think I had really people agreeing or disagreeing with me in the comments for this. Yeah, no real comments on this one, but it managed to maintain a decent amount of views anyway, so I guess uh good for Sega versus Capcom, you know? Glad to get getting views. Quick aside, when are they going to put Sega Sanshiro in a Yakuza game? It's surprising they haven't done it yet. You're right, it is. Um, I wonder if they, you know, if they put Sega Sanshiro in, they would want the original guy to reprise his role, like, you know, to voice act the character, maybe even do mocap for the character. And I think that guy's basically retired at this point. I think maybe he's too old to do it. Um, but yeah, um if I were to add just one more character on each side. Uh, I think the main problem that this roster has is that there's not enough Devil May Cry characters and not enough Bayonetta characters. One rule I gave myself is that that in this roster, Devil May Cry and Bayonetta had to have an equal amount of representatives. So I could not have two Devil May Cry reps and only one Bayonetta rep. Um, so me having a disproport, like me not really ever having enough room on the Sega side for another Bayonetta character, meant that Dante stayed the only Devil May Cry rep on the Capcom side. Um, so yeah, if I had room for one more character on each side, I would include Rodon from Bayonetta, and also have the bonus of like, sorry, my dog almost knocked his water bowl over. Um, and that would also have the bonus of like actually getting like a black character in one of these games, which depending on the company that's fighting Capcom, it's just like a rarity, man. It just doesn't the opportunity doesn't come up much. Um, but yeah, Rodon on the Sega side and Virgil on the Capcom side. Like, yeah, yeah, and maybe uh, you know, I tend to overuse Virgil in my rosters, but I think I should be applauded for showing restraint and only adding Virgil to one of these uh like retrospectives so far. Sega vs. Capcom overall a good roster. You would try to fit in Jet Set Radio. I'd have a Jet Set Radio stage in this game. Virtual on, oh that's good. Or Rent a Hero minus the NFTs in there if possible, but that's just you. Rent a Hero would be fun. Rent a Hero would be fun. Like yeah, it was really hard. Like there were so many Sega characters and just not enough room for me. Um like hell, I think this was one that had a lot of deleted like a lot of characters that I made assets for and then had to leave on the cutting room floor. Like I had Alex Kidd in the roster at some point and I removed him to make room for another character. Um uh Sarah Bryant was there at some point, but then I replaced her with Akira. I guess one cool thing is that like if Sega vs. Capcom came out like in 2 years, Akira would have his weird cowboy design from the new game that's coming out. So there's that at least. He can look less like a weird Ryu. Um uh yeah, I had Akira Kazama from Rival Schools. Left her on the cutting room floor. I had Hagar on a version of the roster for a long time. Left him on the cutting room floor. Um, and had fucking Shiva from Streets of Rage. Uh, and swapped him out for Blaze Felding at some point. Blaze Fielding. Um, you know, only had room for one Streets of Rage rep, and they were both pretty good. You'd also add Knuckles as he's your favorite Sonic character, lol. Yeah, Knuckles would be after Rodon from Bayonetta, like after like putting one more Bayonetta rep in the game. Because honestly, like you could also put in Gene instead, Like I think as long as you have a other Bayonetta rep, I think the character I would add after that from the Sega side is Knuckles, like easily. Especially because like especially after the movies. the movies have made Knuckles so much more relevant again. He was such a neglected character for a long time before those movies came out. One sec. One sec. Okay, I'm back. My Devin has informed me that TikTok uh is no longer available for United States users. It looks like they're systematically like blocking access to people in the States. Uh so that's that. Um but yeah, Knuckles Knuckles would be a great pick. Like one rule I had for myself, kind of like the Devil May Cry and Bayonetta rule, is that is that every is that Sonic and Mega Man would always have the same amount of reps. So if I added Knuckles, I would also have to add another Mega Man character. I wonder if I ever put down any ideas for that on my notes. I bet that I did, and I'm just blanking right now. Because I did have Knuckles down as a Sonic character I didn't have room for. Along, I did also consider Tails and Metal Sonic at different points. I think I decided that Tails would be in the story mode as an NPC. Um, that's funny. I didn't put down any other Mega Man characters. Probably because I knew I wouldn't have room for Knuckles anyway. One of the deep cut characters I wrote down for Sega was the magician from House of the Dead. That's fun. Um, do. So yeah, what Mega Man character would like Mega Man, Dr. Wily are representing the base game, or representing the first Mega Man series. Tron Bonne is repping Legends. Zero is repping Mega Man X over in the DLC. So like that'd be me like grabbing. I'd probably do base.exe. I'd probably do base.exe from Mega Man Battle Network. You know, have like represent base Mega Man's rival, but have the coolest version from him, which is the Mega Man Battle Network version where he has the cool cloak. For Shadow's Wind quote, does he talk about the black creatures? No, we're done talking about the black creatures. Um, but yeah, I think this is a fun roster. Yeah, if I guess making room, um, I would I would probably I'd probably remove Zephyr from Exo Primal to make room for Virgil. Um, Getting rid of a Sega character to make room for Rodon would be much harder. Yeah, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do it. And that's why Virgil isn't in the game either. Because I couldn't do it. I couldn't figure it out. Um okay, well, there's only two of these left to do a quick little retrospective on. And both of these are kind of like fairly big leaps in views. Second place is Marvel versus Capcom 4. Um with 525 views. Um and yeah, like pretty big leap from Sega versus Capcom's viewership. And this would make sense because like Marvel vs. Capcom, I released this video around when the collection came out, right? So people were thinking about MVC. Um, I think obviously like more versus Capcom fans probably got a whiff of this, and versus Capcom fans are gonna think about Rival. And also, this was my biggest roster. I look at all these fucking characters, man. Look at them. Damn. Uh, yeah, this is a big boy, and I think I'm proud of this. Um, but there's also so many characters that that I did not have room for. Like even though I think this is a pretty solid list, uh there's so much representation that's missing. I think this roster has less Avengers representation than would be in the actual game. But I was able to do cool stuff like Lin Kurosawa from the Alien versus Predator game. Uh, you know, like who might be owned by Disney and therefore hasn't shown up in any other Capcom projects. but Capcom would actually talk to Disney about this if they're working on Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Um, yeah, I think there's some fun little Capcom reps too. Like I got Negasonic Teenage Warhead in here. God, actually, I spent so much time in GIMP, like image editing this. Like, I took her art for Marvel Snap and I just like really meticulously like snipped her out of the card interface. That did take me forever. um, yeah, there's so much here. There's so much here. Like, I think one thing, like realistically, like Marvel Rivals has kind of informed a lot of what I got right and what I got wrong. I think one thing I got wrong is you know, I put Mr. Fantastic in here. I put Invisible Woman in here. Um and I've got another Fantastic Four rep in Silver Surfer. Um but like I don't have the other two members of the Fantastic Four. And I think if Marvel vs. Capcom 4 did exist, all four Fantastic Four characters would be in the game eventually. Maybe not all of them at once. I think a couple in the base game and a couple as DLC. Um, but yeah, the final release of this game would not exclude Human Torch or Thing, and I excluded Human Torch and Thing. Um, but yeah, I still think I mostly did a good job on this roster. If I honestly like I shouldn't be given the opportunity to come up with more slots, but if I could add one more character on each side, on the Marvel side, I would add Squirrel Girl. Like I I kind of wrote her off and excluded her when I initially came up with this roster because Marvel Rivals wasn't out yet, and I didn't think Marvel would consider her important enough, and I didn't think Capcom would get the permission to use her. But now that she's one of the breakout characters of Marvel Rivals, I think Capcom would absolutely want to include her, and I think Marvel would say yes. I don't think she'd have like the slingshot gameplay style that she has in Marvel Rivals. I think she'd be more of a rushdown character, that would have squirrel projectiles basically. And she'd have like a double jump and like and she'd be able to like kind of skitter around the stage. Um, You're surprised there's no Miles Morales as he's gotten pretty popular and Marvel are pushing him in a lot of stuff. Also, you need that Spirit Sword moveset in the game. The main reason I excluded Miles Morales is that his silhouette is too similar to Spider-Man's. Um, and I think that gets muddy and confusing in a fighting game. What I When I put together this roster live, what I came up with instead is that some characters would have like basically like enhanced alternate costumes um that like fully change like um the aesthetic, voice acting, and cinematic super animation uh for some characters. But their moveset stays exactly the same. And that's what I would do for Miles Morales. Miles Morales would be an enhanced alternate costume for Peter Parker, uh, who would use his Venom sword in his cinematic super. But the startup animation would be the same. You were wondering if it'd be Squirrel Girl. You were thinking either her or Jeff. Jeff would be an amazing Marvel vs. Capcom character. But yeah, no, it's Squirrel Girl. It's Squirrel Girl. Um, And on the Capcom side, if I had room for one more character, I'd add Cody. Because I think one of the most glaring omissions on the Capcom side is I don't have a Final Fight rep. And this is Cody in Street Fighter. This is Street Fighter 5 Cody. Um, but he still also counts as a Final Fight rep. And I don't know. I'm kind of tired of Hagar being the Final Fight rep in these versus Capcom games. You know, I think Cody is an immensely popular character who'd be a good fit as a Final Fight rep. Um, so if I had room for one more Capcom character, it'd be Cody. But yeah, this is a big ass roster. This is a big fucking roster. But I did it. I did it. There it is. Oh, so many characters. Yeah. I uh I think one of the weirder things I did is um is having um the Behemoth from Exo Primal as the boss character. Um who would uh who would team up with um Doctor Doom to like basically make an army of Doom bots. Um like that's kind of the story. A lot of these characters are fighting Doom bots. Um and you know, I think I think there's an argument to be made for that happening, but like obviously since I made this roster, support for Exoprimal has been shelved, and that game is going to get less and less relevant. So I could see the Capcom boss being someone else at this point. Although I couldn't tell you who on the spot right now. Where are the Inhumans? Ask Marvel, man. I mean, like, I guess my half answer is that Miss Marvel's in the cast, but she's not an Inhuman anymore. uh, I mean, yeah, like there isn't a single Inhuman in Marvel Rivals yet either. Like Marvel is just like they don't give a shit about the Inhumans anymore. They are like embarrassed by their attempt to make the Inhumans a bigger deal than the X-Men, and like I haven't seen an Inhuman in a hot minute. So yeah, ask Marvel where the Inhumans are, and then I'll adjust my roster if they give you an answer. Um, Not since Quake. Ah, Quake. Paul is DLC to make the Spider-Man fans seethe. Paul. Paul is DLC. I'm blanking on who Paul's supposed to be. I'm thinking Paul, and all I can think of is is the rival from the Diamond and Pearl season of Pokemon. And I know that's not who you're talking about. Also, I like how this roster was so big that I needed to make the camera feed like just like my head squished into this little bitty corner. It's like, hello, hello, do you like my roster? Hello. Who's Paul? You love my roster? Thank you. Thank you for liking my roster. It's me, little Daniel, and I'm so happy you like my roster. Um, don't say gross stuff in my chat. You're so cute. Get out of here. Get out of here, fiance. Paul is a new guy they made that Mary Jane is dating to keep her and Peter from going out because the editor refuses to retcon one more day. Boo! Paul. Mary Jane's just dating some dude named Paul. They couldn't even have her date Flash Thompson or some shit. Like actually give that whole thing dramatic stakes. It just has to be some rando named Paul. You couldn't even get, you don't even have her like with Harry Osborn. Paul. Just, oh my god, that's so annoying. uh what's actually funny is that uh the the new Ultimate run of Spider-Man, the new Ultimate Spider-Man run has an adult Peter Parker that's married to Mary Jane, and they get married before he gets his spider powers. He's married with kids. He's married with kids with Mary Jane. Um, and from what I've heard, it's the best comic book run that Spider-Man has had in like a decade. I'm actually really intrigued by it. I kind of want to check it out. There's also an Ultimate X-Men comic that's running right now that has Armor as the main character, which is pretty fun too. Um, but anyway, yeah, there you go. There's Marvel vs. Capcom 4. So there's one roster left to talk about. The one that has the most views on YouTube out of all my shit, out of all my versus Capcom shit. And you've probably figured it out from process of elimination, or you may have. It's okay if you don't remember that I did a Shonen Jump versus Capcom roster. And that roster currently has 747 views on YouTube. For some reason, editorial needs Peter to be sad and down in his luck at all times nowadays. Eddie Brock has things together more than Peter in some ways in the main universe, which is a bummer. Well, that is a bummer. Thank you for bumming me out. Um, uh, but yeah, okay. Last roster to kind of look over is the Shonen Jump versus Capcom roster. This is the other roster that like ruined my life. It was so hard uh to come up with the Shonen Jump side of this roster. Not because I didn't have enough options, but because I had way too many. Um, like, uh, like Shonen Jump crossover games, uh, for at least the last like 10 years or so, have had like twice as many Shonen Jump characters in the base roster than I have in this entire roster. Like I think Jump Force launched with like 30 something characters, like 36 characters or something. Um and you feel like Shonen Jump is the hardest one to do with only 21 slots. There's so many titles that are important to not only to Shonen Jump with its 60 plus year history, but to manga as a whole that I can't include all of them. Yeah, exactly. No, this was torture. Coming up with this roster was torture. And the reason that Shonen Jump versus Capcom uh has 747 views is because it probably has the most discourse. I think it has the most people telling me that I did a shitty job on this. um Actually, I'm misremembering. Really only like three people commented on this. Um, uh, two of them telling decisions that I made wrong. Um, and one of them like being kind of nice about it. Like Just being like, hey, I'd honestly rather have a Shonen Jump 3v3 game developed by Capcom than a crossover game. And here's what I think, here's how I think they could handle that. Which is that guy's nice. That guy was nice. Um, and the other two people weren't even that rude about it. Um, I think I'm conflating the Shonen Jump versus Capcom comments with some comments that ended up on my other manga videos. um I guess the Shonen Jump versus Capcom comments weren't that mean. But yeah, no, this was really hard. Like, you know, like Naruto's here, but I didn't have room for Sasuke. Like, I don't know, man. Yeah, this was really hard. But I do there are things that I like about what I did with this roster. One is that kind of like the kind of the guidelines I used and kind of the game plan I used with it were like this was another 3v3. Um the key mechanic was awakening, aka power up transformations. Every character um had to kind of be able to enter like another form, right? Um like have like a power up form basically, right? Like Goku Super Saiyan, Luffy's gear 2, 3, 4, 5, uh like Naruto's like Kurama form and his sage form and stuff. um so like yeah, all like pretty much all the Capcom characters had to like be able to like power up by transforming like that. um which informed the roster in some fun ways. I had some exceptions, like basically like uh the the staples weren't super beholden to that. Like Ryu would essentially get like his V trigger, like his install where like his fists become electric and stuff. Um and Chun-Li would get like her Street Fighter 5 V trigger. So in those ways some of these transformations aren't too drastic, but we got like Juri with like her feng shui engine, and we got X with his armor upgrades, and Arthur was made for a mechanic like this, with his like upgrading armor. Folu turns into a dragon. Dimitrescu turns into a zombie dragon, kind of. She has a transformation. Uh one of my favorite inclusions was Rajang from Monster Hunter, who basically has like a super form where he becomes like yellow and like his hair stands up, and he would fight Goku in the story mode, and Goku would think that he's a Super Saiyan. um you liked this roster even though this was torture. There's some cool potential here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, this was I think coming up with the characters, like once I was like, yeah, all the characters are gonna have transformation modes. Once I decided on that, I think some of my picks were kind of fun, even though this was really hard. Yeah. If I were to make room. Oh yeah, thanks. Thanks for reminding me. One of the things I got the most shit for when I came up with this roster, maybe by you, were you the one that gave me shit for this? Is that Yeah, did you give me shit for this, Cactus? Is that I put Wingman in the base roster, and someone, maybe it was Cactus, was like, why did you put Wingman here? No one gives a shit about Wingman. No one knows who Wingman is. And that was half of the point. Like Shonen Jump crossover rosters always have like kind of a deep cut like old school character that hasn't been relevant in a really long time that they kind of revive and bring back for various things. And I was like, hey, no, like, yeah, I know the Wingman's obscure, but I think he's got a lot of potential as a fighting game character, and I think he's the kind of character that Shueisha slash Shonen Jump would bring back. And then a few months after I made that roster, a Wingman live action series got announced and and aired in Japan. So like so this was like oddly prescient of me. Like this was like I was like I think Shonen Jump could bring this guy back. And then Shonen Jump brought him back like less than half a year later. I was in sync with Shueisha's executive decisions without realizing it. So yeah, like Wingman is locked into the base roster at this point. You think you made a comment in jest about how one character didn't get in but Wingman did, just like how Gex is in the square one but no Twewy. Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Well, turns out I was right to stand by my Wingman decision. They made him more relevant in the time since I made that roster. Um, but yeah, if I were to get to add one more character on each side, um, so I miraculously made the right choice by putting Wingman in the base roster. One mistake I think I made in retrospect, and this actually was one of the comments made on my YouTube VOD, is that um yeah, one mistake I made is that Ishigo as a DLC character, instead of being in the base roster, was a bad call. And that's become more and more apparent as the Bleach Thousand Year Blood arc has been airing. Like the final arc of Bleach has been getting an anime for like the last year straight, and people have been really digging it. Apparently, it's really good, and Bleach Bleach is like possibly more popular now than it's ever been. So I really should have put Bleach. I really should have put Ishigo in the base roster. And I bring that up when I'm talking about characters that I should put uh characters that I would add on each side. Because I think Ishigo should be in the base roster, and I think another Bleach character should be added as DLC. And I would go with Yoruichi. Yeah, I would go with Yoruichi as the character that I would add, and I would put her in DLC. I'd probably if I had to delete a character to make room, it would hurt, but I'd probably remove Chainsaw Man. Uh, One because like I assumed that Chainsaw Man would gain a lot of popularity with the anime, and it kind of didn't. It kind of kept the same level of popularity. And B, Chainsaw Man isn't even really a Shonen Jump property anymore. Chainsaw Man is in Jump Plus right now, and while it's technically eligible for a Shonen Jump crossover, I feel I feel like with the current roster constraints, Shonen Jump would be more likely to have two Bleach characters than it would be to have Chainsaw Man in. Um, so yeah, that's another one that kind of hurts, but yeah, I think if I had to remove a character to make room, I'd put Ichigo in the base roster, put Yoruichi as DLC, delete Chainsaw Man to make room. Um, I guess I could also remove Noelle Silva to make room, but like she'd have like a water Valkyrie transformation. Like that's so cool. I to keep her in. She needs to stay. She's so great. Honestly, like I feel like Black Clover in general might like get cut, to make room for other characters. You would probably add Kinnikuman, Saint Seiya, Kenshiro, and Gon. You could also do Kahlua with his Godspeed if that works better for the transformation mechanic. Um, like there were definitely versions of this roster that had Gon in it, and eventually I was like, Gon's only transformation happens at the very end of his arc, and it's kind of a big spoiler. Um, and and also like he doesn't do a lot uh in that transformation before the arc ends. Um, So like I was like he doesn't really fit for the transformation mechanic. I don't know if I like the one transformation he has, I feel like it barely counts as something that you could put in a fighting game. Um and I had those thoughts before Hunter x Hunter and then Impact made that transformation part of Gon's moveset. Um so like actually like I almost like the character I was going to make room for, the character I was going to add on the Shonen Jump side was almost Gon, but I decided to beef up representation for an existing property instead, and I think Bleach really needed the extra rep. So Gon's a great pick. Kinnikuman, Man, Saint Seiya, and Kenshiro are all characters that I would add to this roster if I had 10 more Shonen Jump slots. Those are all characters I would add to the roster if I had 10 more Shonen Jump slots. I think I may have even made assets for at least one of those. No, I'm lying. I'm lying. I'm a liar. I thought I made a Gon icon at some point, but I didn't get to that point. Never did it. Um, but anyway, on the Capcom side, um, this character would probably also be DLC. Um, I don't know who I'd replace to make room. I kind of like all the Capcom characters I have. Um, and I guess this is like Resident Evil 2 spoilers. Um, like for I guess both the original and the remake. Um, but I'm about to show a remake character model. Um, but yeah, my pick would be William Birkin from Resident Evil 2. William Birkin is a character that that starts as a regular dude, mutates into this fucking thing, and then like keeps transforming and mutating throughout the game. So like this, I think this would be great as his starting form as a fighting game character, and then he transforms into like one of the more grotesque things that he escalates into. Um like yeah, because right now the roster only has one Resident Evil character, and that always feels like too few Resident Evil characters for any versus Capcom game. Uh it's one of their biggest franchises, and I feel like they'd want more reps. So like, well, yeah, William Birkin is like a DLC character on the Capcom side. Um, but other characters I almost put instead were Nina from Breath of Fire 2. Uh, the Breath of Fire 2 version of Nina does have like a transformation, like into like a sage form. Uh, that I think would be cool, and and I also put down Lieutenant Henry from Hyperdyne Sidearms, which is a game I played during my Capcom arcade tour that I did earlier in 2024. Um, yeah, because he has a transformation and it's cool. But yeah, I decided on William Birkin. I think he's a character that has popularity. I think he's cool and freaky, and yeah, there you go. There you go. Damn. There you go. That's the first Capcom retrospective. I hope you uh I hope you liked those new character selections. Uh yeah, it was fun to dig up my image editing software again and make some new icons. Um yeah, maybe I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the first Capcom project was really fun. It was a lot of work, and uh and I think on average I don't really have time. I like it's hard to find the time to make all the assets for these big fucking rosters all the time, but I am proud of the 9 rosters that I put together. And I think I kind of found the time to make these at the most relevant time. Like I think if I did more rosters in 2025, they wouldn't get the same amount of eyeballs on it, you know? Unless like unless a new versus Capcom game is announced, and then I guess I'll be back in the business of making these. Um yeah, but yeah, valid for Ishigo. Bleach is pretty big. I don't know if I remembered to say that out loud, but I did read that a little while back. Yeah. Um yeah, Bleach is a big deal right now. Your only other thing with the Shonen Jump roster is Nezuko is really indifferent to her, lol. So you choose like Medaka from Medaka Box if I need this to be less of a sausage fest. Yeah, no, like Nezuko, one of the reasons Nezuko is there, I mean there's a couple reasons. One, Demon Slayer is still one of the best selling, most viewed TV shows in the world, period. Um like they're gonna want to put at least 2 Demon Slayer characters in the base roster. Um but one of the reasons is that, yeah, look at the Shonen Jump side. There's almost no girls in the base roster. What? It's Nezuko and Nico Robin. Is that it? Yeah, Nezuko and Nico Robin. And then if you look at the DLC, Noel Silva is the next DLC character, and that's like all the girls in the Shonen Jump side. So yeah, Nezuko needs to stay there. I don't think swapping her out for Medaka really works because like no one in America knows who Medaka is. Her book never got localized over here. But everyone knows who Nezuko is. So, and she'd have a cool move set. She'd have a cool move set. She has super strength and exploding fists, like exploding blood. Um and I really like the idea of like, of a girl character being like the bruiser in the roster, like her having armor on her attacks and shit. Yeah. So like it's not just like an obligation to include more girls. I think she'd be great. Um But yeah, yeah, there you have it. There's the there's the retrospective on versus Capcom streams. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if or when I'll make more of these, but making these was fun. And you know, I do I do have ways to expand on this in mind. Um maybe one day maybe one day I'll utilize some of those ideas. All fair points on Nezuko. You're also aware that you're biased a little. Hey, there's no shame in no shame in having bias sometimes. We we all we all have bias sometimes. Okay.